Stand by for action.
Drop your guns, everyone. And remember, I mean business.
What's your name, boy?
Joe 90.
An unusual name. What are you doing here?
I'm an agent for the World Intelligence Network.
Satisfactory. Most satisfactory.
Look, there are 600 people up there with about 40 minutes to live. Now, you can't help them, but I believe we can. Now, what's it gonna be?
It would seem that this Captain Scarlet is now indestructible. This presents us with the clear and exciting expectation that he will become our greatest asset in the fight against the Mysterons.
If anything else goes wrong, I want you to be ready to act immediately.
Well, that was no ordinary breakdown. We've got to get up there and help them, but fast.
Thunderbirds are go.
Anything can happen in the next half hour.
Welcome to Puppets Go Boom! My name is Aaron.
My name is Patricia.
And we are finally going to talk about Fireball XL5.
Yeah, so this is the series that came out shortly after the major success of Supercar. And instead of, going around in many places, we're going to be going into one specific place. We're going to go into space!
So we are going to be boarding upon Fireball XL5, which is part of the fleet of interplanetary rockets protecting Sector 25 of the solar system from alien invasion under the supervision of the World Space Patrol. In command of XL5 is the heroic Steve Zodiac and his crew that consists of Dr. Venus, Professor Matic, and his science officer, Robert the Robot, the mechanical co-pilot. And so when we first... I'd never seen Fireball XL5. It wasn't a show that I grew up with, because when between 1985 and going towards 1990, obviously we watched the documentary, so you got an idea of how I grew up with Super Mario Nation. So Thunderbirds was my first introduction to Super Mario Nation. Then later on that became Stingray, and then later on that became Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons. And so when we got to Fireball XL5, I had heard of the show, but I have never actually laid eyes on it myself. And so me and Patricia watching Fireball XL5, that was my first time experiencing effectively what would be the prototype. I mean, Supercar obviously was the prototype for how, some of these shows would go. But this was our first entry into the 2060 era, I guess you could say, of Super Mario Nation. So we started off with effectively, them taking it, an interest in, at the space race was at the time, because obviously they were launching, things into space, and, eventually they would go to the moon. I think that's what captured the imagination of Fireball XL5. So they looked at, how rockets, were being taken off at the time, and obviously, with space being this newish thing that humanity didn't really get a hold of, like how it all actually worked. We ended up with sort of like this show, which you can definitely tell is a product of its time in some, quite hilarious ways, and then some very uneasy ways at the same time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what's enjoyable about this. I love the fact that this show clearly took imagination from the space race. I love the fact that it takes place in like this universe in Sector 25. It takes place in Space City, where all our heroes, effectively live. And then when an emergency comes along, so in a way, this is sort of kind of like a start off of what Thunderbirds eventually would be with International Rescue. Fireball XL5. By the way, I do apologize. We have the windows open, so if you hear any background noise in the back, that's the reason why. Fireball XL5, I think, was obviously the start of what we'd eventually see throughout the Super Mario Nation era. You've got Steve Zodiac, who's like, the big hero, and then you've got Dr. Venus, who is, one of the medical officers, and then you've got Professor Matic, who is the, one of the mechanical engineers that would be, the science officer that's on there. And then eventually, the one thing, though, I think that didn't get carried on, I think, to, the next generations of Super Mario Nations was probably, a Robert the Robot type of character, I don't think. Robot characters were actually side characters or guest characters, I think that would take place. But they weren't, I think Robert the Robot, I think, as far as Super Mario Nation goes, I think was the only main character, I think, that they had, who was a robot.
Yeah,
I think.
And I think this will be one of the last times times that they would include like an animal sidekick. Where in the last podcast we talked about Mitch the monkey. This time we have Zoonie the Lazoon.
Yeah, I think Zoonie wasn't really brought into the show until like later on into the series. We were kind of like focused on like our quadrats, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and also in the mixture, we have a lot of other characters. We have Commander Zero, who is like the main commander of the Space City, and then we have Lieutenant 90, who is his companion, who is alongside with him, and he's kind of like the bumbling, lieutenant who's just like still learning about everything. And you have Commander Zero's his family. You have his wife Eleanor, you have his son Jonathan, and you have other characters in the mixture as well.
It's kind of funny because, like, with Commander Zero and with Maddie, wasn't it?
The lieutenant?
Lieutenant, yeah.
Lieutenant 90.
Lieutenant 90, yeah. I think with those characters, it sort of kind of I don't know why, it kind of wildly reminded me of Hong Kong Fu for some reason. Like, you had Sarge, and you had Rosemary, the telephone operator, and kind of like had a thing like where they would like go back and forth with one another. But obviously, Lieutenant 90 obviously is not Rosemary by any stretch of the imagination. He's a very different character. But I don't know, like you've got Commander Zero, who is like he is just so pushed on I want things done efficiently, this, that, and the other, and he's really even going as far as to even hit put himself in a hypocritical situation where it's kind of like well, I want this done, and I would have done it ages ago. It's like, well, you've not done it ages ago. It's like, well, now it's been done now, so there you go.
Yeah, and Commander Zero would be a prototype of all the other commander characters that would be in the Super Mario Nation shows. Commander Shore from Stingray, Jeff Tracy from Thunderbirds.
I think I would disagree. I think obviously with Commander Shore, I would agree with in some aspects, but I mean, I think Jeff Tracy, as hard as he was, I mean, he still was a loving father to his sons. I mean, there was obviously that still aspect of it. Well, I think Commander Zero's relationship, I think, with the rest of the World Space Patrol, I think, is obviously radically different. I'm just saying,
the one who would be in charge of saying all the commands and what they need to do, because we didn't get that in Supercar.
I know we didn't,
and we didn't get that in Four Feather Falls either.
No, I think I think with Supercar, I think you had it was interesting, because we didn't really have an idea of there was one person who was in charge of all of this. It's it just seems these are a bunch of guys who are being paid by the government to actually control be a secret organization for Supercar. There's no real leader, I think, we're in all of this. As far as I'm aware. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Mike Mercury was the person who was there. I'm not too sure. But in regards to Fireball XL5, you definitely know who's in charge, I think, of this whole, organization. And I think as far as I'm aware, I think he goes even higher than that from the looks of it. So the idea for Fireball XL5 is effectively very straightforward. It is Steve Zodiac is the heroic, spaceman, patrolman who goes into space and has to either confront aliens or has to confront other villains, or even has to confront other humans from time to time as well. So there's obviously the recurring villains, I think, in this obviously is the crew of the SS Thor that come in, and I mean, unfortunately, they are your typical kind of foreign sounding villains. Unfortunately, that these types of shows always seem to play for in these types of things. I mean, Rocky and Bullwinkle will say those types of characters.
Yeah, Boris and Griselda are. I think they're the closest equivalent to the main villains of the series.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny though, but don't they remind you of
yeah, they do remind me of Boris and Natasha from Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, I mean, one of them's named Boris.
Exactly, yeah, but they seem to always do this type of things, in these 1960s shows. There's always and I get the height of the Cold War and things like that. So I mean, these always, and also in professional wrestling, they always play the evil Russian villains as well. So those things exist. But I think that with but the one thing I like about Fireball XL5 is that they're not always the villain of the day. It's either this banished alien princess, or it's either these group of monsters who are trying to burn things down, and or it's it's even then. It's like it's a warring group of like two cultures of like from completely different planets who can't get along with one another, and then it's up to Steve Zodiac to effectively bring peace amongst the tribes.
Yeah.
So the great thing about this is that it's not just Steve Zodiac comes and blasts an alien and that's the end of the show. Like no, there's far more to it than that. The one thing I really like about it is that everybody seems to get their own episode in all of this, whether it's Steve Zodiac going in to save the day, or whether it's Dr. Venus having to find a cure for this disease that they found like on this planet, or whether it's Professor Matic having to invent something in order to overcome a certain obstacle, or whether it's Robert the Robot having to follow a bunch of commands in order to get their team out of a jam and things like that. And even Zoonie, I think, even has his
he does.
even though he was a later announced character, he sometimes gets his time to shine as well.
Yeah, he does.
So the great thing about it is that the one thing I always love about these, whether it's super teams or whether it's teams of guys coming in to save the day, stuff like that, Power Rangers, whatever. I really like the idea that the characters are so different from one another that they will play off against one another as well, and there's a nice chemistry that goes on with this. Like once again, we have this sort of kind of confusion of whether Steve Zodiac and where Dr. Venus are are either a couple in this show or whether they're just it's complicated or whatever. We seem to have another one of those, kind of like we have with with Alan Tracy and Tintin, and also with
Troy Tempest.
Troy Tempest and Atlanta and / Marina, I guess you could say. So there's that awkwardness that's in there too. And then you have the relationship between Professor Matic and how sometimes he has to talk Steve Zodiac back, or there's a professional disagreement between Dr. Venus or him about how they should go forth with resolving an issue. Those things are there too. So the only I think character which obviously doesn't get into any type of conflict, I guess you could say, unless you want to count Zoonie, and this is probably Robert the Robot.
Yeah.
I think it is. He's just a robot who takes command.
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, I mean, every single character has their time to shine in which they do something. I mean, clearly there have been more focus on some of the characters than others. I mean, even Lieutenant 90 gets his own episode where he dreams about being the commander for the day. But, once again, just like a lot of others.
And actually, that was the first episode to actually be produced in color.
Yeah.
So that was actually the interesting thing, because originally this show was going to be a color show, but obviously because a lot of the TV stations that they were going to be selling this to only broadcast in black and white, they obviously didn't do it. So if anything, now there's been kind of people releasing episodes that have now been colorized through going through Adobe Premiere or whatever, and things like that. Obviously there's stuff that kind of goes on there, but as far as I'm aware, the episode where 90 becomes the general, I can't remember exactly the name of the episode, but that's the one, as far as I'm aware, that's the only that's been officially colored.
Yeah. It's called A Day in the Life of a Space General.
There we go.
Yeah. But yeah, once again, very similar to a lot of the episodes that some of the episodes we were covering in Supercar, which is a major trope that a lot of people seem to have mixed opinions on, is that this is a dream sequence episode in which, he is pressured into thinking that, the commander doesn't treat me very seriously. What would it be like if I was general for the day? And so you have this whole thing about where he kind of turns into this massive jerk, and then it turns out it's
a very sad episode in a way, production-wise, because this is where they kind of destroyed all the sets and destroyed all the all the stuff, because everything kind of burned and everything like that. And so that's the reason why, there's not, a surviving Steve Zodiac or a Dr. Venus, probably because they burned them and destroyed them, in that episode.
Yeah, and you would think
that... There was a really sad episode, part of that scene that actually got cut, because there's supposed to be a scene where you saw Fireball XL5, crashed and burning on the floor, and all the characters obviously were on fire and stuff like that, and they thought, no, that's way too dark for this show.
Yeah, and then it turned out to be a dream sequence.
But a smoking monkey is perfectly fine.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, and this would be the beginning of what we like to call the post-apocalyptic or doomsday dreams that would follow up in other Super Mario Nation shows that we'll be covering up later. Yeah, that's a sad thing, is that the people behind this show didn't think that it was going to be important for them to save any of this stuff later on. They, when they got picked up to do a Fireball XL5 after Supercar was done with its production, Lou Grade was like, okay, well, give me the next show and, make it bigger, make it better. That way I can be able to sell it out to television companies. And yeah, as soon as they were done and they were thinking, oh, are we going to have like a second season? It's like, nah, move on to the next thing. Typical Lou Grade. And so, yeah, when that episode aired in which everything was just completely burned to the ground, it's like, they just think, okay, well, we don't care about saving these things because we're not going to use them anymore. Let's just move on to the next show. Yeah, in hindsight, it's kind of sad because, these shows are classics amongst a lot of people who grew up with it. And, now to this day, the surviving pieces are in display on museums. And so the fact that, most of these haven't survived is, really sad to think about.
Yeah. So, I think in regards to, all the elements, I think, of Fireball XL5, I think maybe we should talk about, some of the episodes, like how it all came together, effectively. So, yeah. Apparently a lot of people like the episode Trial by Robot, and this episode actually is quite cool because, you've got a guy who is just completely crazy, and he decides that he's going to put, the Space Patrol, World Space Patrol team on, on trial for some weird reason, and and also that he takes control of Rob the Robot as well in this, and so that ends up being kind of like a very episode where there's a lot of risk involved because they somehow got to defend themselves in this trial, and then they got to be sentenced to build more robots or whatever. But funny enough, Professor Matic uses that to his advantage, and takes advantage of the situation and manages to turn the robots against the Professor.
Yeah.
So that was quite another episode that people really like as well as the day the Earth froze, and that actually it was a high stakes episode because there's quite a few high stakes episodes in this because there's the episode where they froze the world and it was all going to plunge into darkness and they thought everyone was going to die in a good couple of hours.
Yes.
And then there was the episode where where all the vines came down to Earth, and then they had to find a way of killing them all, and obviously they got confronted by that really weird bug villain that they're confronted with. Which, by the way, in the documentary, you actually get to see the actual puppet itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
it looks really cool, by the way.
It does, yeah, and that's one thing about this is that they were really imaginative with how the world was going to look and everything, and how they effectively made things look. So there was one episode where I thought had probably the best character, which is Kudos, and which I want to cosplay as a character and run around like a lunatic.
Yeah, here's the thing. So the episode The Last of the Xanadus, where it's about this guy named Kudos, who is the only survivor of this planet called Xanadu. And the moment that we saw him, 3 minutes into the episode, we busted up laughing. In fact, I actually have a recording of Aaron and I's response of this when we first saw it. So I'm going to play it right now.
Oh, brilliant.
Okay, so we just are watching this episode of Fireball XL5, and we just had to pause at this particular moment.
I just had a 5-minute laughing fit with tears streaming down my eyes and my throat absolutely killing me. Every time I say, look at this! Look how ridiculous this situation is! There's a guy rambling in a dress. Well, he's got a literal tape player of him being admired by a fictional bunch of people. I don't know what that is supposed to be on his head.
I think that's supposed to be a crown.
He looks like a crazy person. He's supposed to look like a crazy person. He looks like you've heard Florida Man, right? This is Florida Man. This is what if you look at every mugshot of every person who's been arrested for all sorts of crazy crap, and he looks like that. This is the perfect caricature. My God.
We haven't even gotten through 3 minutes of this episode, and we're already busting up laughing.
Yeah.
Because
I'm glad you didn't catch all the rest of it. But oh my God, this is just me recovering from that. Oh, okay. I'm crying. How is this happening?
Alright, we'll continue.
And you can just tell how hilarious this whole thing is. It's just, oh my goodness. Like, you just got this crazy lunatic with just, like, this bushy hair and these bugged out eyes. And, like, it's just, you can look at this guy and you think, this guy just goes on social media and just talks about himself the entire freaking time. Like, it's just, and then he has a tape recording of everyone cheering for him.
Yes.
But it takes, like, a really, like, kind of, like, really uncomfortable turn when, like, they're trying to, like, figure out where he is. And they're going, like, through these catacombs, and you can see like all the people like cheering for him, like you're all dead in like these coffins, and it's like that's just it's really unnerving to all of it all. But yeah, moving that all aside, Kudos is like the most hilarious villain I think that we've had in this show.
Yeah. I mean, it even got to the point in which Aaron wants to cosplay as him, and that's something that he never does.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I would just love to, like, just go around the Comic-Con just dressed as this guy and just, like, just to start dressing everybody to start worshipping me. I was also remember the tape recorder as well, where, like, we just, people, kudos.
Yeah. Now, yeah, I would say we had just as much fun with this show as Supercar, where we just like poked a whole bunch of jokes and we were just riffing the show to no end. But unlike Supercar, there were a couple of episodes, like you were mentioning before, that actually had a lot of high stakes, which we were really getting ourselves invested in.
Yeah, that's the great thing about this show is like, you would think for one moment, oh, hey, this is just like, a very innocent family show that, you would get all the family get around in. It's like, yeah, we're going to kill all your characters. It's like, what? It's like, yeah, there was a lot of those instances. It's like, wow, like, there's some really high stakes here. It's like, but the one thing that sort of kind of takes you out a little bit from that, and again, this is the naivety of like, them not realizing like, what space actually is that they just think that people can just, we can just exit out of our ships out into space as long as we take our oxygen pills.
Yeah.
It's like, no.
Yeah, that's how
it's cold outside.
Yeah, that's how they're able to work around that. We can't have the space helmet in puppets because we can't put the strings on it. Okay, let's have them take oxygen pills and that they can be able to breathe in space, and then they can just like they're looking like they're swimming in water whenever that they're getting themselves up into.
That's not how anything works.
No, it doesn't.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like it's just
you'll be floating in the atmosphere for like a couple of seconds,
and you'd be dead, and you'd be frozen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like it is freezing in space. So yeah, you can take as much oxygen pills as you want, so you can be able to breathe. But at the end of the day, you're just floating endlessly, and also it's cold in space. So yeah, you'll be dead no matter what.
Exactly. Yeah. Just it's the one thing I think that is that what takes you really out of the situation of like oh hey, this is a really serious situation. Is like well, I'm going to take our oxygen pills. We'll go out into space. It's like that's not how it works. It's like then it just kind of takes you out of it. It ends up being hilarious. I mean, but I mean, given the fact that this was made in the 1960s, I mean, obviously they didn't know back then, like, what things were like, or, they wanted to, like, have more of an imaginative thing. I mean, like, this was, like, just a couple of decades, about a decade later, they made the Jetsons, I think, after that.
Yeah, the Jetsons came out in the Jetsons would have came out, like, maybe, like, 2 years later.
2 years later, exactly. Like, you just watch the Jetsons, the house, just think, what people thought back in the day, or what they thought space was, and the fact that, this was taking place in, like, the year 2004.
No, we come from the futuristic year of 2002, and then Harvey Birdman checks his calendar is the year 2004.
Oh, okay, then, yeah. So,
anyway, but yeah, another thing that would definitely take you off of it is that it says they claim it's the year 2062, but it doesn't feel that way whatsoever. Like, they still smoke inside their houses. And also, Steve Zodiac is pretty sexist.
Yeah, that's the one thing about this as well, is like, he just thinks that women can't do anything. Yet the fact that he brings a woman onto his team and expects him to do, like, all the medical work, she must do something right there, Steve.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you women, you don't know what you're doing. And, there was this one moment.
Oh, yeah, all I'm doing is curing you of a fatal disease. Come on. Great. Yeah, these characters, mind you, the problem is that, with these Super Mario Nation, shows, we do get a lot of that in this, is that, I think we talk about that in Thunderbirds later on in the show, but then, you get the sort of same kind of treatment with Stingray with Atlanta and Tintin, and unfortunately, unfortunately, because
and Marina.
And Marina too, and so unfortunately, Fireball XL5 is no exception. Women unfortunately do get, I think, pretty harsh treatment, I think, in this show.
Yeah, I mean, it would
just place the damsels in distress, all villains. Even the villains the female villains are even worse.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like we mentioned before, Griselda, who is a female villain in this series, and she's the most stereotypical villain that you can think of. And yeah, I mean, I know that it's pretty uncomfortable nowadays.
Look about who was like the Egyptian woman who was banished off to a planet.
Oh God.
And, that was seen as a trap, and yes, here I am, this very erotic woman, and here, have a drink. I promise it's not poison. It's like, it's just this. Women in this show are either they can't do anything but can, or are just incredibly villainous. There's only two ways that women work in this show, which is really obviously it's very hard to judge from 2025 to to judge attitudes back in the 1960s, because obviously it's 60 years ago. But it doesn't mesh well with today's standards.
No, it doesn't whatsoever. I mean, the fact that, Dr. Venus, even though that she is the doctor and she is one of the main characters in the show, the first time, by the way, because all the other characters are either side characters or villains, like we mentioned before. So she's like the first major, female protagonist that is actually just as helpful to the, to the plot of the episode and everything. And
yeah, because in Supercar, it was either the women are all side characters.
Yeah,
none of them were. Yeah, this is the first time that where they had a female who was a main character in the show.
Yeah. And so the fact that you have this whole stupid statements from Steve Zodiac saying oh, you women can't do anything, and I mean, it makes a lot of sense in in one episode in which the ship was not going very far, or it wasn't able to land properly, and then Steve Zodiac said, oh, you forgot to push this button. Oh, you women, you don't know anything about driving. It's like, way to push the stereotype even further that women are terrible drivers. Thank you so much.
If you want a cure for a deadly disease, I mean, obviously, Steve Zodiac comes a knocking.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's been several times in which, Steve would have a disease or would be laying in a coma or something, and it's up to Dr. Venus.
This is what makes me feel like, obviously, these episodes, as we know, were written by different people, and but you can tell the inconsistencies are there, because there's people who play Steve Zodiac off as the absolute hero who cannot be beaten, and there's other times where they show weakness in his character eventually, but then he kind of comes a bit out of nowhere when it happens. Then all of a sudden, he's with Dr. Venus in a relationship, and then other times he's making fun of her and making sexist statements towards her. There's no the one thing I'll say about Fireball XL5, and you can probably say that about a lot of shows. I mean, obviously we've grown up with Rugrats, Doug, Hey Arnold, Ren and Stimpy, and various other times where characters have acted outside of how they would normally act. I mean, obviously those episodes exist because they've been they've been written differently from the status quo. But unfortunately, Fireball XL5 suffers quite a bit from this, because all of a sudden a character will be have one attitude in one time, and a character will then have a completely different attitude in another time. For example, there was a time when in some episodes where Professor Matic just will be very sociable, and there's other times where he'll be Dr. Beaker, and he just wants to be away in his workshop and doesn't want to be disturbed. Pick a lane with some of these characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Or there'll be times in which that Steve and Dr. Venus would be going on a trip to relax and have fun and be away from work, and then there'll be other times in which they're teasing one another, saying oh, you women can't do anything, or Steve, you're working too hard, or Steve, don't do this, it's too dangerous. It's you've been through many adventures together. It's which is it? And also, what is your relationship? I mean, I know you guys go on a lot of adventures together in space, but what is your relationship? Are you together? Are you just colleagues? Are you just work companions? I mean, what are you? Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's just, as far as I'm aware, it was never explained.
No.
No. I mean, I think, if anything, that probably, I don't know if they did oh, will they or won't they? And maybe, if the show was going to go further towards, maybe there might be something that might have, come towards the end. I don't know, but you can definitely tell that they didn't really know where to put these two characters in regards to a relationship, whether they were, I can imagine there was a debate that was going on in the writing room. There was probably some people who were for it and some people who were against it.
Yeah.
It tells in this show.
It does tell. And, okay, let's talk about Zoonie, who is Dr. Venus's, animal companion.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Yeah, just this.
I hate him.
Oh, yeah, he's, there's times where like he will put characters in dangerous positions just for the plot. Like he's a comic relief plot convenience. I think you could say that he is, because it's like he'll either send them back in time or he'll put them in some sort of danger, or like he will do something that will you think will be played for laughs really, but if anything it just kind of comes off as like annoying. It's like, holy crud, like, that's our character that we care about, Zoonie. Stop it.
Yeah, I mean, in that episode that you were mentioning before about kudos, I mean, that's literally what it's about, is that, he finds out that he's the last of his kind, and he wants to spread this disease to finally kill him off once and for all, and Dr. Venus wants to find a cure.
In that case, then kudos is the hero. Okay, I'm being a bit cruel there. It's like,
Anyway,
yeah,
but
my other writer wrote that line for me.
But yeah, I mean, there are times in which he actually causes the problem. Like, when, like Jonathan, for example, who's, Commander Zero's son, is like, oh, I want to be just like you, Pop. I want to go into Fireball XL5, just like Steve Zodiac. And so you have Zoonie coming along and following him, and then, he ups and, like, steals the, Fireball XL5 while Steve and Dr. Venus are out elsewhere.
I was going to say, it's not as hilarious as Mitch the Monkey hijacking a spaceship to, like, blast himself into space.
No, it's not as funny.
Well, it's not like, we had to stop the episodes or laugh it all off and then, like, start it all off over again after we recovered. Like, no, it's not that hilarious. Yeah, this is the thing. Mitch the Monkey, I think, it's funny because why do we have more fun with Mitch the Monkey than we have with Zoonie? Because Zoonie, I mean, in a way, was just as somewhat as annoying and somewhat as like, he didn't make a lot of mischief, but for some strange reason, we gravitated towards Mitch's mischief and we didn't towards Zoonie. Do you think it's because maybe we can relate to more Mitch as a cuddly monkey than we can instead of like this Zoonie Lazoon sort of like thing?
And also the fact that, the one time in which Mitch talked, it was hilarious because with the Boston accent, and it was a dream sequence. With this one, he actually does talk, and the only thing he can say is, welcome home, and it's like, and he's like, he completely wrecks everything and destroys everything. Commander Zero's like, oh, you stupid Lazoon, why do you destroy things? And
then he walks it back and says, well, all right, you are a cute monkey, and we're just kind of sitting there like, what?
Yeah, it's like, what?
Lazoon's not an upgrade from Mitch.
No,
I'm going to safely say that. I enjoy Mitch the Monkey more than I did.
Yeah, even the people in the documentary said that he was a completely unnecessary character.
Exactly. Yeah, and also, but mind you look at him and you think, you can't really sell toys with this, can you?
No, I mean, with Mitch, it's like...
He looks like a Pokemon. I mean, it's like, you could probably get away... If he was a Pokemon character, then, he's bankable. But, I mean, like, as a character, like, in this campy, Super Mario Nation, Fireball XL5 show, like, I don't understand how you can move units with this character.
No, I mean, everybody would want Fireball XL5, like the ship, and it makes a lot of sense because it was the space age. Everybody wanted to be going up into space. They wanted to be astronauts. They wanted to know about what was beyond planet Earth. And yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be too much of a surprise that they would want the spaceship as a cool toy. But yeah, I mean,
but you want something that is like when they sat down to say, okay, if we're going to have the cute comedic character, we need to have something that is like Mitch the Monkey. How on earth did they end up with Zoonie? I really want to know what the thought process was behind that.
Well, because he's an alien pet, and it's like, okay, well, he looks strange. He's almost like a monkey, kind of. So let's just see if we can work something around that.
But I mean, like, for me, it would have been like, okay, it's an alien, but I mean, like, you could have made him cute. You could have made him fuzzy. You could have given him some cute big eyes, like Mitch the Monkey has.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, to be honest with you, I mean, if I had a go at trying to doing a Mitch the Monkey for Fireball XL5, I pretty much throw my hands up in the air and say, let's just put Mitch in the show. But I mean, obviously, you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
There was other ways to go instead of combining a lizard and a monkey. Or what was it? A lizard or what was it? Lazoon. So
Lazoon.
Yeah. Well, there was other ways to do this, and I think, Zoonie was the wrong decision.
Yeah, and you wonder why they never did another animal companion again.
Well, no, I'm not too surprised because, I think after they did Mitch the Monkey, I think they probably they didn't know where to go after that because you've already created in a show a cute monkey character, and I think it wouldn't have worked in Thunderbirds. It definitely wouldn't have worked in Captain Scarlet because that's not the direction that they were going to go in. No. And in regards to Joe 90 and the Secret Service, we've actually not sat down and watched the entirety of Joe 90 or the Secret Service yet. So whether there's any cute characters in that, I'd be quite surprised to see if there is.
I don't think so. I mean, we saw the first episode, and from the looks of it, it doesn't have like a cute animal companion.
Yeah.
Anyway, but let's talk about Robert. Yeah, like you were saying before, the only robot character who's actually like part of the main crew.
Yeah, and apparently played by Jerry Anderson with a voice box.
Yeah, it almost kind of reminded me of when David Graham was voicing the Daleks for the first time.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was interesting to hear how they came up with the voice where, Jerry Anderson would like put a voice box up to his throat and it would vibrate his vocal cords, and then after that it would get the voice of, on our way home. And so learning about all of that I thought was really interesting. And also the fact that you look at Robert the Robot actually looks very futuristic, in the way that he deals with it. Unfortunately, I think obviously with him trying to stick a throat, actually that was in a dream sequence, wasn't it, where he tried to stick a sword down his throat.
That's like another dream sequence where Steve was talking about my ancestor was a trapeze artist, and I want to become a trapeze artist just like my ancestor, and that's where we see Boris and Griselda for the first time, in which
that's interesting. Why do we? Out of all the, maybe the production order was in out of order at that time, but why would you introduce Boris and Griselda in a dream sequence? And why would you not make them if anything, they should be in episode 2 or 3 at the least? You would have thought. Maybe you would have set the premise up in episode 1, and then you would eventually have a reoccurring villain coming up throughout the rest of the show. But to only start them off in a dream sequence and then start introducing them later on in the earlier episodes, that's weird.
Yeah, I'm sure it was probably a production misorder.
I probably imagine it was.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because, that's the thing with a lot of these productions is that, when you're producing a show, it's not it's up to the television companies on what episodes they want to air, depending on what's ready for them to go.
In regards to the production mismatch, wait till we get to Stingray.
Oh, God, yeah, when do we get to Stingray? That is a mess in itself, but I would just say that is not as noticeable in Fireball XL5. With the exception of maybe a handful of times in which you get to see reoccurring characters, you do get to have moments where you get to see moments is wait a minute, didn't this already happen before, or didn't we already meet these characters before? And it's there was a massive issue with the production order.
Yeah. So, with Fireball XL5, obviously we're going to try and keep these episodes contained every time we do one of these Super Mario Nation shows, but I've got to be honest with everybody, I didn't find this as fun as Supercar. And let me just kind of feel this out a little bit because for me, Supercar, we could sit down and, we did, I've got to be honest with everybody, we did kind of go a bit Mystery Science Theater 3000 on, on Supercar a little bit and a bit of riff tracks, but I don't know, when we kind of sat down and did Fireball XL5, we did get more involved in the show and we didn't make as many jokes, I think, as we were watching it. And so I don't know whether it's the fact that we found Fireball XL5 less fun than Supercar. I don't know, but I think maybe because there were times when in Supercar some mostly inappropriate things were going on, like Mitch the Monkey smoking the whole pack of cigars and somehow not, having health effects of that. Or then you had
cultural appropriation.
Oh yeah, there's also those types of things as well that we kind of made fun of a little bit. But with Fireball XL5, I think there's more because it's in space and because they wanted more adventure and because you have Steve Zodiac, I think dare I say it's probably more adventurous than Mike Mercury is. I'm just saying that. I'm open to the opinion in the comments to tell me that I'm wrong. But I felt because there was more action, more adventure in Fireball XL5, and there was far more, character dynamics going on, and there was far more to get indulged in and far more to get involved with the Fireball XL5. I feel like I wasn't maybe as thoroughly entertained, I think, with hilariously with Supercar than I was with Fireball XL5. I mean, I don't know. Am I making sense here?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's that I think that Fireball XL5 was trying to treat itself a little bit more seriously, where it had like the high flying adventures, and you got to get invested in the characters, and there was a lot of stakes that were going on. I mean, there were several times in which the characters or even the world almost was destroyed or died or anything like that. And
we were like, oh my god! I mean, is this gonna be it?
Yeah, I mean, there was like
even in the dream sequence, one where they destroyed all the Z's, like, oh wow, like this ain't going so well, is it?
Yeah, it's like
then we find out it's a dream.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would argue that the first dream sequence with Steve Zodiac and the whole circus thing was pretty dumb, and it was kind of uncomfortable when they were talking about like the flying gypsy, and it's like, oh no, we don't call them gypsies anymore. And the whole we have Robert like sticking the sword up his system, and then he just completely just crashes. I mean, that was pretty dumb. But then you have the other dream sequence where Lieutenant 90 was dreaming that he was the general, and then everything just goes completely wrong, and then Space City gets destroyed. Fireball XL5 explodes, and it's like, oh my god, what's going on here? And then we realize there's a dream sequence, and it's like, oh wow, like that was actually really interesting.
There's also the episode, Mystery of TA2, where we find out that Colonel Denton is still alive, but he's now leading this whole group of like race of people.
Yeah.
And so those episodes are intriguing because the one thing I think would have been pretty cool, which I know they never would have been able to do this at the time because that's not the way shows worked, but if they made reference to the legendary Colonel Denton who went out into space and never returned and things like that, if they played it out like that, and then they did the Mystery of the TA2, and it's like, oh wow, we're about to find out the origin of what's happened to Colonel Denton, they've referenced him all these episodes, what's happened to all this time. I think they could have interestingly built something up like that if they decided to reference him in some of the other episodes, and then you find out, oh wow, he's leading this race of people now to peace and prosperity and everything like that, and he says oh, I've been on this planet for such a long time, for 50, 60 years, I couldn't imagine myself going back to Earth now. It's and so you can respect that. It's but it's nice to know that he's alive, and that they can report back to him, that's a nice feeling to have. It's oh wow, you've always wondered what happened to this character, and so there's if they built that up, that would have been pretty cool. But even in the episode as it stands on its own, that still is a pretty intriguing episode to figure out what happened to him.
Oh yeah, for sure, absolutely. And
I love that episode.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there are a lot more solid episodes that got us invested as opposed to Supercar, in which that even when we try to take it seriously, I know that the fan favorite episode for a lot of people of Supercar was the running train, but we couldn't take it seriously because of how fast the train was going. It's we weren't concerned about Dr. Beaker and Professor Popkiss who are trapped in this train and are going really fast. No, we were just laughing at it because it looked ridiculous. And, we were we had the Benny Hill theme whenever that we saw it go 1,000 miles per hour.
Yeah, exactly. I think with Fireball, that's a good thing as well, actually, to mention, is that I think they probably learned from that a little bit, and I think they realized how to, when they wanted the Fireball XL5 to be serious, they knew what tone to take. And then when they wanted to bring in some hilarity, they knew how to do that as well. Dare I say, and maybe you're going to tell me I maybe might be wrong about this, but I think the puppets walk better in this show than I think that we've seen either in Supercar, or dare I even say, in some of the other, Fireball XL5. Like Thunderbirds or even Captain Scarlet.
Yeah, and I also think that another reason why that was able to work was because they were in their vehicles a lot, so they didn't need to walk as much. And also, it does look kind of stupid when they're floating up into space, but...
Well, yeah, so some of the elements of that, keep in mind, that was the naivety of, how space actually works, so that sort of kind of adds to, the way that the show was at the time.
Yeah.
But I think in the way that, the mechanics of the puppets, dare I say, I think are probably a bit better than some of the other ones that we've seen.
Yeah.
I think, and definitely I would say, with Supercar, where I think they had a massive struggle trying to move Master Spy around, and you can definitely tell because they basically just kind of like trundle him in.
Mm-hmm.
But in Fireball XL5, you can see Professor Matic has a running sequence. Like, great, he's running.
Yeah,
like, you can see how fast he's going and everything like that. That must have been pretty a breakthrough probably at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then they were able to make it where they made them look small, they made them look big, and they could do more, I think, with Fireball XL5 with the way that the puppets worked. They were even obviously there was like a bit of dancing going on in Supercar, but I mean
the dancing looks even more ridiculous.
Well, the dancing was funny. I mean, I think in Supercar, and dare I say, it kind of looked a bit cute. I mean, I think the one thing I would say is massively over exaggerated is Steve Zodiac trying to clap to where the in the listening room when he was listening to some music.
Speaking of which, that same episode they actually sung the ending credits of Fireball XL5.
Yeah, I think they started doing that after a while because obviously Troy Tempest sung the Marina's theme during his dream sequence.
Yeah,
and then interestingly enough, they didn't in Stingray. They replayed it for the credits when they already did it the first time. But in Fireball XL5, they sort of kind of played like an instrumental.
Yes,
at the very end of it because I think they're really sure they've heard it already once before, so they didn't really hear it again.
Right.
So that was good. The one thing I'll say about the Fireball XL. I might be wrong about this because we actually skipped the intros of Fireball XL5. So I don't know if they ever changed up the tune or changed up the theme in part of the episodes.
No, they never did.
I don't think they ever did. No, but they did in Supercar, which
yes.
I was a bit of a critic of. But in this, as far as I'm aware, they kept it consistent.
Yeah,
which,
they did.
And also the intros of Fireball XL5. We're actually not talked about this yet. They make Fireball XL5 look so immense. In this, and I think this is what gives Fireball XL5 its magistry. I think because they had close-up shots of saying how massive this rocket was, and then they showed the one thing I think they were a bit aware of. I think during the show is that they had this bit where they could see that Fireball XL5 wasn't actually going to properly take off. It kind of just like this dip, and then it looks like it's about to crash. But then they later episodes they edited that bit out. And so they only kept it in once for that. That's when they actually decided to crash one of the XL rockets.
Right.
But I think besides that, I think in Ray that they did launch sequences for Fireball XL5, the way they used Fireball Jr., the way that the rocket operated, in the limited knowledge that they had, I think it was a pretty cool spaceship.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And again, we were able to see through the documentary and how they were able to put that together and using a lot of models and using a lot of camera angles to make it really big and using magnetic parts so that they can be able to separate from Fireball XL5 to Fireball Jr.
Yeah.
And
I think they were under I probably imagine they were under a lot of pressure doing that because how do you make something more cool than Supercar? You'd have to build a giant rocket, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
Look how big this thing is.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Luke Gray wanted. He wanted to have a next evolutionary step from Supercar, and Jerry Anderson was able to do it in strides where they were able to put all those pieces together.
God, I tell you what, after making Fireball XL5, I would have probably been pretty scared to make Thunderbirds. Even to start to think about what the next big thing after Fireball XL5 was going to be.
Yeah.
But obviously, in our next episode, we're going to talk about that legendary show.
Well, no, we're not. We're going to talk about Stingray.
Oh, sorry. This. By the way, people are wondering why I say that. Keep in mind, I grew up with Thunderbirds first, and then I watched Stingray, and then I watched Captain Scarlet after that. So that's the reason why I see them all backwards.
Yeah.
So you're going to probably hear a lot about that during this podcast as well.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't really have much to say, so I guess we can just wrap things up.
I'm going to say that Fireball XL5 I think was a very, very important show for a lot of reasons. I think the fact that you had Dr. Venus, I think, becoming one of the first female protagonists, for the show, and the fact that you had this really great team dynamic, I think, going on between Steve Zodiac, Venus, Matic, and Robbie the Robot, and including Rob the Robot from Star Fox 64. I wonder if there was any inspiration for that. I don't know.
I mean, it could be. I mean, we talked about
Super Mario Nation was big in Japan.
It was huge in Japan.
Yeah, exactly.
And Miyamoto was a huge Thunderbirds fan, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Rob the Robot kind of got there.
Maybe he watched some Fireball XL5. I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, it was broadcast all over the world. Fireball XL5.
It was, yeah.
I wouldn't be too surprising. But so you had this great cast of characters. You had this really cool idea of them being like, space explorers and like, part of these patrol people who laid down the law, across the galaxy. It was a shame that it did. I mean, we know Luke Ray, obviously, cut things off, when they were hot. But it would have been so cool if we probably had further episodes. Like, why does the World Space Patrol, exist? Why do everyone accept that it's authority and everything like that? I wouldn't be interested to see if they would have gone a bit further deeper down into how this world works. But for what we got, with the comedy, with the action, with the adventure, with the characters that we had, with dare I say, even the dream sequences, I think were sort of fun, even though, we don't really like the whole dream sequence episodes, really. But that's just in general for all these types of shows.
Yeah, well, don't worry. Stingray will be even worse. Not only will we be getting the dream sequence, we'll be getting the clip show episodes.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
We'll talk about that.
You know what? That's another thing we didn't mention as well. Fireball XL5, to its credit, and also Supercar and all the other ones do not have clip shows.
Yeah.
Now we're getting into the clip show era.
Oh boy, and that's going to be fun.
Mind you, I think it's a bit unfair to say, because a lot of shows then at that time started having clip shows.
Yeah,
so,
and
even 90s shows that we grew up with, that were for our thing had clip shows too.
Yeah,
so we're not ones to criticize.
Yeah, but don't worry, we'll talk about that next time and when we talk about Stingray. But yeah, let me just give my final thoughts on Fireball XL5. Yeah, I do think that I was able to have bigger enjoyment with this than Supercar in terms of like getting myself really invested in the characters, the story, and the setting. I think that the fact that they were able to have a lot of high stakes in it made me like really care about what was going on as opposed to like me making a whole bunch of jokes. Now, don't get me wrong, there are several episodes that are in there that I can just riff on and make a whole bunch of jokes at, and we did that. But yeah, I didn't do it as much as compared to Supercar, and that just goes to show you that they really went back to the drawing board and they were able to iron out some of the flaws that Supercar had, and they were able to improve on it. There are some little problems of it, of course. I mean, as we mentioned before, that it definitely does feel a product of its time. And it doesn't feel like it's the 2060s. It still feels like the 1960s. I mean, you can tell with, the fact that people are smoking inside and they're reading newspapers, they're playing with vinyl records, and the whole sexism statements from Steve Zodiac to Dr. Venus, that is a bit uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But I do think that they were able to improve and gotten better with their productions and their storytelling. And it can only go up from there.
Cool. All right, then. Well, that is it for Fireball XL5. And as you corrected me earlier on, we are going to be moving into our next episode to Stingray.
Yeah, all right. So until then, everyone, take care.
Bye-bye.
I wish I was a spaceman, the fastest guy alive. I'd fly you around the universe in Fireball XL5. Way out in space together, conquerors of the sky. My heart would be a fireball, a fireball. Every time I gazed into your starry eyes, we'd take the path to Jupiter, and maybe very soon we'd cruise along the Milky Way and land upon the moon. To a wonderland of stardust, we'll zoom our way to Mars. My heart would be a fireball, a fireball.